Hello everyone. I want to invite you today on an adventure into the South Pacific. Yes, I know I live in the South Pacific region, but you're not coming as far as New Zealand. We're just going to Tahiti. I want to look at two puzzle games today. I don't normally cover puzzle games in my videos, but I actually do play quite a lot of them. And while I enjoy them, I have to admit that I'm jolly useless at them. I'm just not very good at many of the types of puzzles that are out there. It's rather frustrating, but I do my best and try to enjoy what I can. Now, some puzzle games I find easier than others, and you may have had the same experience. I'm not really interested when people say, "Oh, these puzzles are easy. If you can't do them, you're stupid," kind of reaction. That's not helpful at all. No, just because you can't do a puzzle, you're not stupid. I have always wondered all my life what it is exactly that makes some puzzles easier for certain people and other ones difficult, and the other way round, and whichever combination you can think of. I'm sure all of you can think of at least one type of puzzle or puzzle game that you just rolled through quite easily, and another one where you thought, well, this looks like it should be simple and straightforward, and you're just scratching your head and you just can't figure it out. Now, people usually have really simple explanations for that kind of situation that I never find very satisfying. With the recent advances in the scientific area of neuroscience, I dived a bit into the literature and refreshed my mind about what it is that makes our brains work and how the two hemispheres in particular work together. And things are not quite as simple as they might seem. Now, I know neuroscience, war, heavy stuff. This is a video about games, it's not meant to be heavy. Well, just bear with me. I think it's actually really fascinating. Spoiler alert, I don't have the solution to this question either. I'm not a neuroscientist. As far as I gather, they're only at the beginning of really figuring out how all the different parts of our brains work together. But what's even more exciting is a real adventure, and you know how I love those. So here I have The Call of the Sea. This is the European PS4 edition. Now, I did not initially get this game on the PS4. I only purchased it very recently. This is called Norah's Diary Edition. And it comes with a few nice goodies inside. The way I encountered this game first was on Game Pass. It popped up one day and I saw the colourful icon looking very 1930s stylish, and I was immediately attracted to it. And when I read that it's set in the South Pacific and it's an adventure about a woman trying to find her husband who disappeared, I was instantly grabbed. It sounded almost a bit sort of Indiana Jones to me, with jungles and old ruins and mysterious stuff. And, well, I said, sign me up, I'm going on that expedition. So this is Norah. And being a Game Pass game, I didn't bother reading up about the game beforehand. Why would I? I simply dived in. I did realise that it was a puzzle game, but that didn't deter me. Why would it? No, all I saw at first was the lovely art. An exotic setting on a mysterious island somewhere off Tahiti. Sounded good to me. And this item, you can see, is a boarding ticket for a ship going to Tahiti, Papeete, November the 1st, 1934, sailing from San Francisco. Now, I know there aren't many items in this little box. It's a day one edition. It's definitely not a limited edition. But I have to say the items are nicely selected and nicely presented. And here are two photo-style art prints. This is Norah and her husband Harry, obviously based on artwork in the game, but done sort of in the style of a vintage black and white photo. And photos do play quite a big role in the game as part of the evidence you have to piece together. And a second photo of the Everhart expedition, and that will be explained in the game. They set out in June 1934, and I'll be playing the prologue and first chapter of the game. It's quite short, and that will give you a bit of the background setting to the story, including this expedition. There will be no significant spoilers at all in that beginning chapter, so if you want to play the game, I don't think you need to worry. It just gives you a bit of a flavour of what you're in for. You know me, I'm always very careful about avoiding anything that might give away something important from the storyline. And here is a small art book, soft cover. That's actually quite nice. The developers have written a short introduction, and I want to read that out to you because it is actually important for understanding what the game is about, what to expect, so that you can decide for yourself whether this is really of interest to you or not your type of thing. So this is from the Out of the Blue team. Out of the Blue are the Spanish developers of the game, and this is their first game. We grew up reading HP Lovecraft stories. Absorbed in his tales of horror, their strange worlds and their impossible cities made us experience bewilderment and fascination of the unknown. At the same time, we were avid puzzle and adventure game players. We spent hours scratching our heads and taking notes to find the answers to puzzles found in dreamlike and strangely beautiful landscapes. And from the desire to combine these two passions is where Call of the Sea comes from. We hope you enjoy Call of the Sea as much as we have enjoyed making it. Now, this is really important because it gives you two clues as to what the game is really like. one aspect completely bypassed me at first when I played it on Game Pass, because, as I said, I hadn't looked up any information, and I am not a reader of HP Lovecraft, meaning I simply haven't read any of his stories, or very, very little in the past, so I don't have any significant knowledge and therefore wouldn't have any particular recognition of names or references in any media, really. So it was only when I was already halfway through the game that I thought there's something odd here, something I'm not getting, and that's when I checked online and found that there was a strong connection with Lovecraft. Suddenly certain things fell into place. Now, I need to stress, however, that not being a Lovecraft reader, I don't think in any way means you can't enjoy the story. It just means that certain references, etc., will not strike a chord with you. That's all. But you will get the overall atmosphere that they convey. The other thing they talk about is actually more significant for anyone attempting the game, and that is them mentioning that they were scratching their heads and taking notes to find answers to particularly challenging puzzles, and how they loved doing that. If that describes you, then I would say this game is tailor-made for you. It doesn't quite fit my personality profile, because if I have to spend too long walking around a puzzle and banging my head against a proverbial wall and getting frustrated, then I lose enjoyment and lose it pretty fast. I might even back out. So that proved a bit of an issue for me as I got deeper into the game, and I would say once you're past a halfway point, especially, I seem to have a memory of chapter 4 being particularly extensive in the puzzle torture chamber, I got stuck. If anybody says they've never ever got stuck in a puzzle, I'm not sure I would believe that. But I know the feeling, and I got stuck there. And I thought, I'm either going to spend literally days figuring this out, and by then I'm going to expire from exhaustion, or I take the easy route and I look up a guide and see what the solution is. And that's what I did. It meant I could complete the puzzle and carry on with the story, because that's what really interested me and drove me to persist, because I wanted to know what happens to Norah. How does the whole mystery unfold? What is the answer in the end to all this? And it is a fascinating journey and a fascinating answer, and I found it well worth my while sticking it out to the end. I did rush things a bit in the end, so that I didn't get all the collectibles and clues and everything that, contribute towards your achievement score, which didn't bother me at the time, because I just wanted to finish the game, and that's fine, I think. But when I saw that the game had come out for the PlayStation as well, and I'll just give you the dates on this. So the game was first released for PC, Xbox One and Series XS in December 2020, and then it released for PlayStation 4 and 5 in May 2021. So I only recently noticed that my local retailer here happened to have copies of this Norah's Diary edition, and I thought, with quite some time having passed now since I played it, but clearly it left an impression on me, and I thought, I wouldn't mind getting that for my PS4 collection, but also I think I would like to replay it and really enjoy it this time, because I know the game, I know most of the puzzles, what to expect. It should be easier so I can really relish it and complete all the little tasks I didn't get and all the collectibles and whatnot, and that would be satisfying, being able to do everything. Now, I don't often do that at all, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to play all the different games I play. So in a way, that's a mark of my appreciation for the game, that I'm wanting to do that. So here are the two main characters, Harry and Norah, their design. Some details of the flora of the island. There's some more expedition items. There's a lot of stuff to sift through in this game. A lot of items you need to inspect. You don't know beforehand which item will have the little marker on it as you approach to tell you that there's some information there, so you need to carefully check everything. Some of the items and icons important in the puzzles, and one of the scenes of a camp on the island. So a small but rather nice concept art book. Now, concerning the question of the Lovecraft connection, I just want to add that the team out of the blue themselves, the founder, Tatiana Delgado, emphasized that they only took inspiration from Lovecraft. The game itself is not what is commonly perceived as a horror game. They took what she calls the surreal and oniric parts, so the dreamlike parts of Lovecraft. That was their inspiration for the game. And they said they also drew influence from other games, such as Firewatch, Myst, Soma, and Subnautica. Out of those four, the only one I am not familiar with is Subnautica. All the others I have played, and I can definitely see a strong connection with Myst and also Soma. Firewatch, not so much, except that's also about a husband and wife relationship. So if you're into the type of exploratory puzzle game that is Myst and Soma, if you enjoyed those, you might want to take a look at Call of the Sea if you haven't yet. So inevitably, once I started looking at what type of information was available for solving the puzzles, I came across reviews, and that's where I found that the majority of the critics actually thought the game was on the difficult side, and they found it frustrating at times. That gave me a bit of a fillip, to be honest, because I thought, well, okay, I'm not the only one who got lost in some of the puzzles and had a real struggle finding my way through. So the general description on Metacritic says, Call of the Sea received positive reviews from critics, praising the narrative and the island setting, but criticising some of the game's puzzles as being obtuse. And I can see where they're coming from. But what may be obtuse to one person may be as clear as daylight to another. However, there clearly is a large number of people who found the puzzles confusing and not always clear enough. So this is where I come back to the question of what is easy and what is difficult in a puzzle. One thing I have found over the years, and I don't know how you feel about this, let me know, that sometimes I think a developer, who is basically an author, gets so involved with their own creation, and they can see the world they are creating, and they work day after day and night after night on puzzles and detective type clues. They're completely immersed in that world, and to them it all makes sense. It's obvious, really. Anybody would get this, they think. But the moment you put it out there to other people, to whom the world, the story, the mystery is all completely new, and they don't know what they're heading into or sometimes what they're looking for, it's not obvious at all. I think that can be a failing when teams get so involved that they don't step back and maybe get in someone who is not part of the team and just say, oh, just have a look at this puzzle. Would you be able to solve this? I think maybe some basic mistakes could be avoided. I have had games like that where I thought I can't follow them into their thought world. I have no idea what they're going on about. Call of the Sea, I would say, is not one of those. I would not level that criticism at them, because the level design and the basic game loop is very clearly constructed, and the game naturally leads you from one puzzle to the next clue putting together, which helps you then to solve the next puzzle. So the only problem I really had with some of the puzzles was that they were very lengthy. There were a lot of steps involved in piecing it together, and if you just missed one step somewhere, and they were often also physically, the locations were separate, if you just didn't find that one part and you weren't aware it was missing, then you could be going around in circles. That got a bit too perhaps convoluted at times. That's why I said I got stuck at one point and needed help from a guide. But on the whole, especially once I'd reached the ending, I felt that it was all quite challenging at times, but it was fair and well constructed. The game is good in that it has a variety of puzzles calling on different skills, while the style of the puzzles is always very coherent. It's all set within this specific, mysterious island world. The nature of the puzzles is often quite different. So whether you have to move things about or, in some cases, recognize and decipher an icon language that they invented for the game, I found that one quite difficult. And I have pretty good language skills, so yeah, that tells you it is quite demanding at times. Yes, there's a whole world of puzzles there, and I think if you enjoy that sort of thing, you're going to have a whale of a time with it, really. I can't remember offhand now, because it's quite some time ago since I played it, whether there's an in-game hints system. I don't remember one, because I'm sure I would have used it. I think it would have been helpful, because to be realistic, you might be aiming your game at a very specific audience, those who are already into head-scratching puzzles and mysterious, Lovecraftian type of atmospheres, etc. But you can't guarantee you're always got to get those people, and are you going to say, no, you can't play my game? I'm sure that's not what they would want. So my message for developers would be, don't make it extra difficult for people. If someone just wants to enjoy the story and solve a few puzzles, but, not feel like they have to stop and give up if they can't get past this puzzle and never find out what happens to Norah, that would be a shame, I think. Give people options. The puzzle hounds will always go for the most difficult route, obviously. And those who just want to maybe experience the story, because it is a good story. I even remember seeing some critics saying, I wish they hadn't put so many puzzles in and had done it more as a visual novel with the occasional puzzle that doesn't hold up the story too much. So there's another option. Obviously that's hard to do for a smaller studio with limited time and resources, but it is something to bear in mind. You immediately have a much wider audience that you can potentially pull in. Now the second puzzle game I have for you, and I will show you a bit from that as well, is the Last Campfire. And I do not have a physical copy of that. I'm not aware one exists. I have never seen one. If you know of one, please let me know. Now that game I played very recently and I posted about it on Twitter, so you may be familiar with it. And that's another game I enjoyed a lot, really a lot. I think it's an absolutely lovely game. And it's one of those games where I sailed through. I don't recall the puzzles giving me any real trouble at all, which is really unusual. I did have Poodle Power by my side for a lot of the game, and I find that helpful because if I can't see something, and my eyesight's not that good anymore, he sometimes says, oh look, there's a block over there, do you think you can use that? Or what about have you looked over there, have you seen that? What I don't get, he might get, so together we usually find the solution in a very reasonable amount of time. But that one I found really, really straightforward. And I remember saying to someone, oh, this game is lovely and it's super simple. And afterwards I thought, that's not really the right thing to say about a puzzle game, because I may have found the puzzles simple, but to someone else they may not be that obvious. If you love pulling about levers and switching light beams to trigger something somewhere so other blocks appear and this sort of stuff, then it probably is a piece of cake. But not everybody's brain works like that. That is the conclusion I have arrived at after reading a lot of the science literature about how our brains work specifically for problem solving, and of course puzzles are basically problem solving. And puzzles are often used by researchers because they are considered to be useful for developing the brain, both with youngsters as well as for older people who need to hold on to the last little grey cells they've got left. So there's some interesting stuff coming out there. One thing I just want to emphasize that I notice a lot of people still cling to the notion that the left side and right side of the brain have a sort of simple alignment that determines what kind of personality you are, whether you are more the logical type or more the creative type. This has become such a convenient shorthand that people still use it. But of course, It's complete rubbish, really. It's been debunked exactly 10 years ago when there was a flurry of scientific articles as well as popular science articles explaining that this is such an oversimplification and that you cannot tie personality traits to what happens in the left and right hemisphere of your brain. So I've taken the time to catch up with a few more current developments in neuroscience. The only thing I can say is after 10 years, they're basically saying there's so much they don't know yet. They're only at the beginning. So from that reading, I found a few answers to the question that had been puzzling me all these years. Why do people react so differently to various puzzles? My intuition had always told me that every human being is unique and different from the next one. Our brains are all different, sometimes subtly different. It makes sense to me that the way we process information is slightly different for everybody. So the way we will approach a puzzle will also differ. If you think about it in different terms, people who are good at hitting a ball precisely, if they practice that particular skill or talent that they have, they are likely to become maybe successful tennis players. Likewise, someone who's just naturally very good at maths will probably seek out a career that involves something to do with maths. So the type of approach you have to figuring out something, or what you find easier to figure out and be successful at rather than something else, the maths whiz may not be good at cooking at all, even though cooking involves numbers. So I always seem to have been good with anything that involves a grid map. Give me a grid map and I'm happy, and I can usually solve almost anything that's constructed along those lines. So talking specifically about puzzles, I came across mention of two psychologists, Sternberg and Davidson, who have argued that solving puzzles entails the ability to compare hidden information in a puzzle with information already in memory, and more importantly, the ability to combine the information to form novel information and ideas. The thinking involved in solving puzzles can thus be characterized as a blend of imaginative association and memory. It is this blend that leads us to literally see the pattern or the twist that a puzzle conceals. It is a kind of clairvoyance that typically provokes an aha effect. I thought that was a pretty good description. The author, who is a professor of semiotics and anthropology at Victoria College, University of Toronto, also mentions that puzzles seem to tap into a universal part of brain functioning, even though they may appear in different cultural forms. So in other words, puzzles are actually cross-cultural. We find the same types of puzzles, just with slightly different people, objects and names, etc., in all the various cultures throughout the world. And that is really interesting because it tells us that puzzles are always also stories, aren't they? That is very, very ancient and deep-rooted in the human brain and the human psyche. Now finally, I looked at the question of the brain hemispheres because of that right side, left side issue. I'm referring to an article by cognitive neuroscientist Kara Federmeyer, whose research focuses on language memory and hemispheric asymmetries. She's a professor of psychology at the University of Illinois. And she said specifically how and why the hemispheres differ remains a mystery. They are actually remarkably similar physically. Now, she explains in this article, which I, together with other information, will reference in the description below, so you can follow it up if you want to. She goes into a lot of detail about how information is processed in both hemispheres, and obviously there's also an exchange of information, but the whole thing is incredibly complex, as you would expect, because the brain is jolly complex. She talks a lot about neural networks. I found that really interesting because the way she described it reminded me a lot of the kind of functions that computer networks have. It's actually not that dissimilar, how information is processed. Except I suspect the brain has far more possibilities than any computer, which way to go and to assess a piece of information, and what memory to call upon. Memory is so important. And she concludes by saying that given that the hemispheres do operate somewhat independently, the question of how their independent processing is eventually combined and or which hemisphere gets to take control of processing for a particular task is one that we are only beginning to understand. However, it seems safe to say that for the most part we all use both sides of our brains almost all the time. So basically, I can't tell you how we solve puzzles, but each and every one of us will have different ways of using our neural networks, the information stored in memory that we can pull out to combine with the information given in the story to try and work out what a puzzle might mean. In my opinion, a good puzzle is one that doesn't force you into doing it only one way. You have to do it this way, otherwise it's not going to work and you're not going to get a solution, and that's it. It's like the issue I remember we had in maths classes when our teacher always said, I don't mind how you arrive at the solution, I want to see how you did it, but most of you will use a different path to get there. And that's how a good puzzle should be constructed, that it doesn't confine you in a cage, so to speak, but says, here are the working pieces. You can proceed whichever way you like, as long as you've got a working solution in the end. That's my ideal puzzle. Now, talking about the Last Campfire, that game has an interesting approach to inviting people in who might not normally enjoy playing a puzzle game, or one where they feel pressurized. Will I be able to solve it? I can't progress if I can't get this puzzle. They provide an option in the settings which says you can skip the puzzles. I was kind of a bit bemused by that, and I thought, well, I wonder what that means. I just wanted to play the game because it looked so sweet and nice, get the story and a few puzzles, and I didn't feel like I had to do 100% everything. So I thought, let's have a look at how they've done this. And I ticked that option. I will show you in my recorded footage what exactly that means and explain it there. However, I can say straight away that the end result of me playing the game was that I actually wanted to play all the puzzles, which originally I thought I might want to skip. but I found they were so nice, I enjoyed them so much, that I did want to do them, and I did them all, and I did the complete thing, and I had a great time with it. If you're a bit worried because the game has a very melancholic atmosphere and it's clearly set in a little world that is a sort of in-between world between the living and those who have passed away, if you find that slightly morbid, well, actually it isn't. They've done it really, really well. And you don't need to worry about maybe having a sort of a tearful, sad ending, because the ending is what I would call uplifting. So from me, it's a complete recommendation. It's a beautiful little game. So there you are. 2 puzzle games in one video, together with a discussion of neuroscience and how the brain works. That's more than you bargained for, I bet. I hope you enjoyed my look at these 2 games and might even be enticed perhaps to try one of them. As always, thank you very much for taking the time to watch and listen. Please keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye.